welcome everybody. It's an honor to be asked to be the keynote speaker here today. I thank the committee for that. So when I was preparing my discussion, when I was asked, my main immediately went to things like AI and mass, and then I thought about it a little bit, so a little bit more. So I'm going to stick with some more foundational stuff because I still get questions around these areas. I should mention I am Steve Hauptman. I am a technical lead on an IBM from the Maximo team. I think I might just eke out Marianne a little bit. I'm just around 29 years with Maximo in the development area. So just a little fact for you there. So I'm going to go through a few items, like I said, more of a foundational area. I want to cover some of the questions that we get around the different database flavors that we support, and some of the questions, especially that have come up around mass movement, about some talk about how to query some of the data in Maximo. I'll talk about the amounts and integers because I do get some questions around those, and I'm going to finish up talking a little bit about Maximo and time zones. So the database flavors. Right. As we know from our EAM product, right, our 7.6 and earlier, we support Oracle, we support DB2, we support SQL Server. This has not gone away. We still support all of those. There is questions that come up around, do I need to convert? Can I stay on with what I have? Which one should I go to? Should I convert? Do I need to do this? I'm not sure why that question comes up all the time, but it does. And should I go to containerize? What other flavors do we have? Oracle's got Autonomous DB and RAC and a bunch of things, and DB2's got at least 5 or 6 different versions of things. SQL Server has a couple, so talk about that a little bit. And of course, we've entered into the world of NoSQL a little bit with MongoDB predominantly, but you can also use DocumentDB if you happen to be on AWS. So let's talk about this a little bit. The only time you absolutely have to convert your database from whatever you have today is if you're going to mass SAS. If you're going to, and you're not on DB2 already. If you're going to mass SAS and you're on Oracle SQL Server, then you need to go through this database, the DB2 conversion. The development team, as I put here, is not exactly a fan because it means monkeying with the database, which inevitably leads to problems that don't show up as a conversion problem. It's something else, and it takes us months to figure out that it was all because of the conversion. A little bit on the frustrating side, I have to say. But in any case, if you're going to go through that process, either because you've just decided Oracle is too expensive, or SQL Server doesn't suit you, or hey, DB2 is free, or whatever, get somebody involved. Get like Maven or somebody else to help you do that conversion, because it's more than just moving the data, right? There are a lot of queries that are built in Maximo, a lot of them you built yourself around data restrictions, workflow conditions, any other conditions, data restrictions, save queries, right? Which may contain database specific syntax that have to be converted. Reports, also similar type of things. There's a lot of places, there's some properties that are specific to the database platform you installed on, and those need to be modified to now support the new platform. So make sure you do a lot of research and get someone who's done this before involved. Not that I'm saying you should convert, but everything should remain the same, especially if you're just staying as sort of managed by yourself and not a SaaS process. And which one is better? I get that asked the question a lot. It's really personal preference. If you're a Microsoft shop, then you're probably using SQL Server, so go with SQL Server. If you're moving over, if you use Oracle and Oracle Financials and all that, then that one would be better. So it's really a personal choice. There's no particular one that's better. DB2, of course, we've tested more on our DB2 versions than the other ones. Not that we don't test the other ones, we certainly do. But we've tested more of the flavors, right? So I listed here from a containerized version, DB2U, I think you use for Universal, DB2 Warehouse. Those we use in-house here often. And one thing to note, those two databases, containerized versions will install with what they call columnar indexing. as opposed to row-based. And column, though, does not work for transactional databases like Maximo, so it needs to be changed to row-based, which we do as part of the installation process of Maximo, of Manage, when they're pointing to a DB2 database. So we automatically change it for you, but just be aware that that is there. And of course, the free entitlement includes access to DB2U, DB2 Warehouse, as well as DB2 Standard Edition. So that's the DB2 thing there. We have tested the Oracle containerized version, mostly through the performance team testing. And so generally, things are looking good. But whether you want to use the containerized or leave it outside the OpenShift container OpenShift platform and use your own, that's kind of your call, whatever you like. And then, like I said, there are a ton of varieties of each of these platforms, and we test only a certain number of them. Like I said, we test a bunch of the DB2 stuff, we test Oracle, we test SQL Server, but not every flavor. We've just recently gone through Azure SQL testing from a SQL Server standpoint, but generally speaking, there's more things than we can test, and that comes in as a question all the time. And the statement we generally make is Maximo should generally work fine on any of those flavors of Oracle, SQL Server, or DB2. But we haven't certified it because we haven't tested on it. And so there is possibility you might find something. It's rare, like we haven't certified on Oracle RAC for a long time. Well, I think we have now, but we haven't in a long time. But everybody was using it and it worked just fine. And in general, that's the case. We did find recently that Oracle Autonomous Database did not work. And we had to make some changes, which is coming out with 9.1. But we haven't gotten far enough to know if that actually completely fixes the autonomous database problem or just gets us to the next level of problem. I suspect it'll be fine, but we don't really know. But I would check that SPCR tool. There's the link in there, and I'm assuming we'll be supplying these things, so you'll have that link to copy and paste and look for what exactly is directly supported. But we generally will say if it's not listed there from a database platform, you're probably okay. If you have a work order problem or a purchase order problem, you'll be fine. If you start having problems with database configure or update DB, and it starts to point to an uncertified database, that's when it'll get a little sticky in terms of support and our capability, our ability to be able to help, I guess. But like I said, most of the time these things are fine. The NoSQL database, the new kid on the block, right? It's not used by Manage EAM at all. It is used from a mass standpoint. You'll see that a lot of the user information is stored in there, although we're making some changes for 9.1 and further changes in 9.2 about what's in there. Actually, we're using it less. There's some licensing info. There's some other stuff that Mass Core stores. So it's used all for that. NoSQL typically isn't particularly good for transactional data like Maximo does, like EAM does. And so I don't think you'll see Maximo ever moving into a NoSQL database, or potentially use it for something like attached docs or something, but I don't know. We'll see. There are other apps that leverage the Mongo and the DocumentDB database, specifically Monitor and MVI. If you do add those on, they'll add more data into those things. And the NoSQL is good for running some of the upgrade downtime that we have today, and add some flexibility in the process. But because of the transactional nature of Maximo, generally speaking, it's not going to be the thing we're going to move to. But it does help on the mass side and for these other apps for their purposes. All right, so let's talk about data querying. So let's start with the search types. Let's start at the very basic level, right? In database configure, you can go to this, you'll bring up an attribute, and you can see the different search types. There's 4 of them. There's none, there's exact, there's wildcard, and there's text, right? And these pertain only to the varchar type fields, ALN, upper, and lower. Exact means exact. So if I type in APPR, I'm only going to find something that has APPR. I'm not going to find Whopper. I'm not going to find anything else that looks like that. It just could be APPR, exactly that, right? When I do wildcard, it's that like concept, right? So when I say APPR, it'll also bring me back the Whopper records because they're like APPR, right? The text, right, uses a slightly different syntax, like I put there, although there's more to it than that. And it's looking for an index as it's formed around the words that could be found in all the documents, if you will, but the records in Maximo. And so around without a D is not going to find anything because that's not a word. But unless you have one of those somewhere stored in your database as a typo. But otherwise, things like around would be found, obviously. And it's going to look for them in any order. So guard and around, it'll find things that says, here's the guard that goes around the border, or if you look around the border, you'll find the guard. Both of those will come back when you do a text search. It does do some things like understanding the plural or the singular based on what you typed in. They'll return the same values. Some of the behavior might be a little different because we're just leveraging what Oracle SQL Server and occasionally DB2 will provide for us. We're not doing anything just like the equals and the like. We're just asking the database to do its thing. One thing to know, a couple of things to know. One is it takes a little while to do that indexing. So if you add a brand new record, you'll see a delay before you can find it. It's typically within 5 minutes, I think is the number, but it won't show up immediately. DB2 text search is not available at all if you're using one of the containerized versions or you're using DB2 on cloud. For standard and advanced, you can install a separate DB2 package to allow for text search, which is another one of those things to consider if you ever decide to convert from or to DB2. Because the search type, when you're on DB2, on one of the non-text enabled platforms, will never let you be text for the search type. And so if you convert, let's say, from Oracle to DB2, where all those attributes say text, those won't work. You're going to have some problems. They have to be changed to either exact or wildcard, or potentially none. I'm not quite sure why Ben would do that. For standard and advanced, it's possible that you can leave them the same. So again, little remember about that. And then what actually happens can be overrode at runtime, even though the default is to be exact, wildcard, or text. And we'll get into that a little bit more later, but let's talk about some special characters. I think most people will know about the percent sign and how that will work, and that's the thing that gets used in the like, right? And the percent sign is just going to look for anything in this section of where the percent is, right? So if I look for fire percent, I'm going to find anything that starts with the word fire and then has anything else after it, right? So all my examples are in there around fire truck, fire station, firefly fired. The percent fire, right, is going to do exactly the other way. What ends in the word fire? And all those things you see listed there would be returned. And then, and this is the default behavior in Maximo for when you have it as wildcard, is the percent on either side, so it's anything that has fire anywhere in the statement, right? The underscore works very much like the percent sign, but it represents a single character. So in my example from before, if I put underscore fire, it's only going to return a fire from the list that I have above, right? Because it's one character before the word fire. And fire underscore, similarly the other. You can use multiple underscores, right? So in the example here, right, if I have 3 underscores after fire, it's going to look for something. It's going to find firefly, but none of the other ones because it's looking for 3 characters following the word fire. So what other? So you got to be a little careful. If you got those percentages on both sides of the thing you're searching for, you're probably not going to use an index, certainly not on that column, right? Percentages in the thing will not also not work, but percentages at the end, you have a chance. They call it an index scan or index range scan, and the system can now sort of find it. The other cases, it just can't find where it is. Now, like I said, here, that might not be a problem if you're searching on other things, right? So if you think about work orders and maybe responsible person, reporting user or whatever, I can't remember the name of the field, right? If you're already filtering by site, and you're already filtering by, it's not a task, and you're filtering by only open work orders, it's already going to use that index. So the fact that you might use a wildcard to sort of report by as well, you're probably fine, right? You're not going to be a problem. But if you clear all that and just search for the reported by with like, I don't remember that we have an index on that necessarily. Well, even it doesn't matter because it's going to put percentages on either side, and it's going to be a performance problem. So just, if you're going to use the wildcard type of a search, which is very convenient, finds you a lot of the things you're looking for, just make sure you've limited that list by something else that is indexed, right? And as I said earlier, you can change this on the fly. If I have my status as exact match, so when I type in APPR, it's only going to find me APPR, not the Whopper ones. But if I wanted to look and say, well, wait a minute, what about Whoppers? I can put that % sign before my APPR manually, and it will convert, and it will do that like instead. Conversely, if I have the status as Whopper, as the search type as wildcard, I can put an equal sign in the front. So APPR by default, when it's wildcard, will find me the Whoppers, but I can say equals APPR and limit myself to just see those approved records and not the waiting approval ones. Using those percentages and the equals and all that inside of a text search field, I've seen different results. And it depends on the database platform. And a little bit depends on the data. So just be aware. Mostly it makes sense after you realize what it did. But you may want to just check on that when you do that. Moving on to our special characters, exclamation point. Exclamation point means not. It's not. If I say exclamation equal, it means I mean not equal. So not equal upper will mean bring me all the records that don't have upper. Now you can use that in a number field, so not equals 1. So if I want all the records with a priority not equal to 1, I can do that, and it'll return me back everything else. Date will work. I can say not equal to May 1st, 2025, but I can't do that for times and date times. It's it's not that it gives me an error per se, but because the milliseconds start coming into play, you're not going to get that right. Let's just put it that way. And no, finding a blank record in the dig, right? Showing me all my assets, or all my work orders rather, that don't have an asset, right? I can use that tilde null tilde concept to find those, right? And you can combine with the not equal sign and find all the rows that do have an asset in my work orders. But dates and date times, again, a bit funky. That one will actually give you an error if you try to search for the null dates and null date time fields. You're going to have to go to the where clause to modify that one to get that to work. Speaking of dates, there's some special characters here or special terms and stuff that might make your lives a little easier. If you type in the word today in a date field when you're doing search, it will find you all the records for today, whatever today is. Similar YTD, year to date, will show you all the records for this year. And then you can also shortcut things. If you go to the reported date field to do a search, if that's on your list page, and you type in a 1, it will look for all the records reported on May 1st, 2025. And of course, you can also do 6-1, leave off the year, well, let's say 4-1 or April 1st, maybe 1-4, depending upon where you are on the planet. And it will find you all the things from April 1st of this year. So interesting bonus here is you can actually use this for data entry, this last bit. So if you're typing in when it's reported, or when this target start date is, or something to that effect, if you just type in a 1, it'll and tab, it'll set it as this month, the first of this month, this year at midnight. So some of this maybe will help you just in simple data entry. Amounts and integers. How am I doing on time? So why are they special? Well, we use, obviously use amounts and integers all over Maximo to do a bunch of processing. And for amounts, going back to Forex, we used to actually have a currency symbol that showed up with that amount based on the currency type you were using, and we would recognize it was an amount. When we added second currency capabilities, we ended up having amounts and decimals because they didn't use the same currency, right? Some of it depended upon the vendor's currency and so on and so forth. But on the database, they're the same types. And integers are, well, integers, we don't want you being able to create a record that has an integer that's too big because it turns negative at some point. So some control there. And big int is big int. It's just, you can't get the chance to configure that one. It's going to be what it is. Let's just leave it at that. Now, around the 6x time frame, up until that time, we let people modify these values individually per attribute. And that was a never-ending series of PMRs, cases, issues, depending upon when you started with Maximo. For people having problems with truncation and rounding, and inevitably the cause was somebody didn't change all the fields they needed to change. So we swung the pendulum the other way, and we said, okay, all amount fields will match this type, this size, and all integers will look like this, which caused a different new set of problems. And as you can see there's an idea out there that we've been talking about and looking into possibly adding that would give this somewhere in between, something that will allow you to configure different amounts to be different sizes. The use case I always think about is the gasoline prices here, right? In the US anyway, where I might pay, $1.79. Well, no, never do that. That would be a long time ago. But it's 3 digits to the right of the decimal point. But then when I pay at the cash at the end, I'm only using 2 digits. So to be able to have that kind of configuration capabilities without putting us back into this truncation rounding set of problems. So there's this idea that will out there to help with that. And I think it also covers some integer stuff, because obviously task ID does not have to be very big, but other integer type values might be much larger. So be able to configure some of that. And finally, let's talk about time zones. Another mystery to many people. So first of all, time zones only apply in Maximo to date time fields. If there's a date field like the work periods or the PM due date, right, we're not applying a time zone to it. Because if I tell you that the due date is May 1st, what day is that in New Zealand? Like, it really depends upon where you're standing at the moment. And so, especially if you put in a time value as part of your frequency. So we don't do dates, we don't do times, we only do date times. Also, it's not really IBM and Maximo. There's a utility, a jar file called ICU for J. In there, it knows about these things. It knows about time zones. It knows about daylight savings time. And we just make calls into it to tell us what the right value is. From time to time, a country has changed its daylight savings time pieces. And unless the ICU for J has been updated, you might see some wrong values. I haven't seen a problem in that in a long time. We generally try to keep that up to date, and also I don't think countries are changing that often, but that's where those things are coming from. All of this requires that your application server and your database server are basically in the same time zone and pretty much with the same date time running. In order for us to be able to mathematically do all this, I should add, everything on the database is stored in that time zone of that application server and database server. Another one of these conversion problems, if you convert and your new database and you decide to do application is a different time zone, all those old records are still stored in the old one. They don't get updated somehow magically. And so you want to be sure, you want to be careful around that, because once you start adding new records and now you got a mix, it can be painful to untwine. So careful on that one. The time zone rules application, right now only handles the PM Wogen stuff, but allows you to generate your PMs based on the time zone of other information in Maximo. Maybe it's the assets time zone, maybe it's a locations time zone, maybe it's a time zone tied to the site. But that will help you, a lot of people, I think, with being able to have Wogen run in the cron and have different time zones applied based on the PM records it's processing. And labor reporting. Labor reporting has been a pain for a long time in time zone purposes, especially for people that might have work being done in one time zone and somebody else completing the work order and validating that information. So it's gone through many patches over time. Many people have finally changed it, have tried to make some changes, some quick fixes, some max bars, that kind of thing. But eventually we went through a major set of changes. And we went from having the 4 fields, start date, start time, finish date, finish time, to basically 10 fields, 6 persistent, 4 non-persistent, as it says there. And it's probably the only place in Maximo where you might go to database configure and see that the attribute name and the entity name don't match, right? We did a little sleight of hand in order to cover some backwards compatibility. And the entity name is the actual name on the database. So something you may want to just research. It's kind of cool from a geeky sort of way. And I believe that ends my presentation. I hope everybody has learned something, taken something away. And from here, let me turn it back over to Marianne.
Very good. Thank you so much, Steve. That was a wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions, Pam?
I think Shannon has a couple that you wanted that came in.
Oh, Shannon, sorry, Pam.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, I do have one question. It was, can you share any tips on application searching on the list page of Maximo apps? Our casual Maximo users, not SMEs, don't understand the concept of databases and can't seem to remember to use that wildcard or which wildcard to use and when. And often get frustrated when trying to find records or creating queries which take a long time to run. Any tips you can share on this?
Well, one thing I would say to do is if this is maybe for any individual client side, right, to understand the way that business searches for things and making sure the search type as defined in the database, right, is appropriate. So it's doing a wildcard when it really should be a wildcard. It's doing an exact when it, because you always type in the full status. So don't do the wildcard. It's not useful. It might be bad performance, right? Or you have something set to exact and people are like, they can't type in that many letters. They don't remember what they all are, right? They only remember bits and pieces, right? So wildcard, obviously it would be better there. I think pretty much everything out of Maximo, out of the box, is a wildcard. There's very few. I don't think there's very many that are exact, right? But, if you're doing exact and that kind of thing, then absolutely, I would make sure that I've got those set up appropriately. In terms of, it's a hard one to say if a user is trying to do something complicated but don't really know what they're doing. That's always a hard one to handle. I don't have any real magic bullet out there. You could try, modifying the more search fields, maybe to either have additional things so don't have to go to the where clause to type them in, or the other way around, remove some of the fields that might cause some pain. You don't use people type things in, or it's something that people try to search for and it's never indexed, or you can add an index. If those are the things that commonly are searched for, I would put something, look into something around there. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Are there any links to help files or quick references?
health files or quick references on things like search type? I'm not quite sure.
I think that's what he's asking.
I did not go through the help documentation to see if there's anything in there that talks in more detail about this. But here's an interesting tidbit for everybody. If you go to the managed or any of the mass documentation, you will find there's a little thumbs up, thumbs down thing in the top right-hand corner. If there's something that's not, you can't understand what they're trying to say, or it just doesn't have enough information, well, you think it's great and you want to let people know, because we always appreciate that as a developer. I only hear about problems. You can click on one of those thumbs up and thumbs down, and it'll give you a little box. You could type in something like, I really need more information about the search type field because people are confused and I don't understand. That will actually create a ticket for our content design, our documentation folk to go and take a look at and enhance and change. So please make use of that.
All right, thank you. One more question just came in. Is IBM exploring simpler search pop-ups for non-technical users?
I'm not aware of anything, but that would be if someone could flesh out what that looks like in their mind. You can certainly create an idea to put that in, but you can also I don't know if we're sharing emails here, but I would be more than happy if you sent that off to have a conversation on the side. We could talk about that.
Okay, great. And one more that just came in, a slightly different topic, but can you share your thoughts on the new formula application? Specifically, can formulas be used in a Maximo query, or can I take the Maximo formula like MTBF and use that in the KPI?
Ooh, so I like the formula stuff. It can be very useful. And you can definitely use them in conditions. Don't think you can use them in a query because it's just gonna a saved query directly. I'd have to double check on that. That would be a cool use, right? Give me anything where MTB is greater than MTBF is greater than 10 or something, whatever, right? Something that's telling me the thing that's taken a long time to fix. Now, in the newer stuff, the newer graphite level, the Maximo application framework stuff, where we're using REST and JSON, I think you have a little more capabilities than you have with what we call the classic app. But I'd have to go back and look into that one. That's an interesting question.
All right, well, thank you. That's all the questions that I see.
Very good. Thank you again, Steve. We really appreciate it.